Everybody, how you doing? Marc Ross. We're back. It is August 18th. Ructions with Marc Ross. I'm Marc Ross. And my good friend, Gerald Ashley. Gerald, how are you? The other part of the Ruction podcast.
Mark, I'm well. It's August, so welcome from England to the land of weather warnings, which we talked about last time we were on. And now the Met Office or Meteorological Office, or whatever the full name is, has gone into overdrive on warnings. Today I received not directly, only via the media, a yellow weather warning for rain. I looked out the window and we had quite a huge amount of drizzle. And what to say? Weather warning inflation. It seems now it's a really rare day if we don't get a weather warning. But other than that, it's August, it's a silly season, and I suppose the Met Office are participating.
We had a storm 2 weeks ago here in the DC area that was quite unprecedented. So unprecedented that they closed evening activities post 3 p.m. and they let people leave the office early because essentially the storm was due to hit. It was a proper storm, but it was just a thunderstorm, windstorm, lightning, summer storm, potential for tornadoes, but they let offices close early at 3 p.m. and send people home. I've never seen that before. I've seen that with snow. But I don't know. Weather is just, it literally is a everyday occupation.
It's overhyped.
And,
overhyped. You know, you're not in a typhoon in Hong Kong. When I've been in a typhoon in Hong Kong, and you absolutely definitely go home, though it can be just as terrifying if you live in an apartment on the 20th floor. So the best thing to do is to go to a bar.
Here in the States too, the Maui fire, quite dramatic. It looks like it was one of the largest fires we've had in the States. Maybe possibly 100 plus people have lost their lives. But yeah, I don't know. Every day it is like calamity, destruction, climate change, depression.
We have to be careful because the broadcast media over the last 30 years have had an absolutely quantum leap in technology. And a lot of this stuff didn't get reported. Even somewhere as, as westernized, if you like, as Maui in Hawaii, 30 years ago on London, that would it probably wouldn't have got on the main 10 o'clock news because they had no film crew. They wouldn't have had any reporters or anything, and they just wouldn't have run it as a story. Now, everybody in his mobile phone is an instant journalist, and it's incredible the amount of probably too much news, and there's a big focus on weather. I mean, you'd be hard pressed not to find a weather story every day, really, wouldn't you?
No, I agree. I think that you're spot on. I think there's probably some psychological term, some bias that somebody's thought of, or you probably even know. Like certainly the access to news doesn't always tell the full story because it's theoretically possible over a 1,000-year period that this weather has happened before. It's just that, yeah, we have smartphones, coverage, broadcasts, satellites, and we can talk about it. And it's interesting. I mean, basically every day the weather in my life is absolutely fantastic. It's perfect. It's manageable. But every now and again, there's going to be some bad weather. I don't know. It's quite interesting. What about the Lionesses? Do you have Lionesses fever? Are you ready for the match on Sunday?
No, not exactly. I think complacency.
Oh my God, you're so dour. You're so dour. You're not going to go down to the pub and put out the Union. Well, I guess it's the St. George flag, right?
Yeah, look, I feel an overwhelming tide of indifference.
An overwhelming tide of indifference. And for somebody who is so down on France, you're more passionate about the Tour de France than the Lionesses bringing it home. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I don't tend to go for the French cyclists you may have spotted before. No, obviously it's quite an achievement. It's getting a huge amount of coverage here in all the media. The Labour Party politician and leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has managed to make an even bigger fool of himself than usual by saying that if they win, we should have a national bank holiday. This is nonsense squared, but as I said earlier, we're in August. On another level, it does show is women's football, soccer, whatever you want to call it, going to, now move up a gear? Or I think it's fair to say, I haven't watched any of the competition, that the range between the good and the bad is still very wide, though you would expect that to probably narrow in future competitions. But away from a ladies' game, the number that absolutely struck me a couple of days ago, and this you'll love this number, is Manchester United. I don't know if they have formally said this or somebody's calculated it, or it's from a sensible source. They reckon that they have 650 million fans around the world.
Yeah.
Now, this is your formula. Now, take $10 off each of those, and you've got a real business. And that just shows that your mantra of global sports just rolls on ever more. And I guess ladies soccer, football is kind of catching up on all of that.
Well, 2 points. Yeah, I think as we were just talking about global weather, I mean, global sport, I plan to get up early, 6 a.m. to watch women play soccer, Spain versus England. Super exciting. And to your point about Man U definitely is a juggernaut. If you recall, a few years ago, Chevy was the sponsor of Man U. But do you know they did the announcement in Singapore, right? The new global brand sponsor of Man U, a team in Manchester, England, sponsored by an American company, Chevrolet, doing the announcement in Singapore. I mean, it's globalization gone mad. It's absolutely amazing.
Absolutely. In a similar vein, the England football captain, Harry Kane, has moved from Tottenham Hotspur to Bayern Munich, which would have been a pretty big story anyhow. But it was kind of the second string to the story that he signed a lifetime deal with Skechers, the footwear producers, and the whole thing. This must have been planned a lot in advance. But there's a whole marketing campaign around him and Skechers. And oh, by the way, I'm off to Bayern Munich, and it was that way round. It's quite extraordinary, actually.
Well, speaking of parades, this is a good segue. Argentina. Let's talk about what's happening in Argentina. The last time, you've had some great parades prior to that, normally around a marriage or a death, I suppose. But, the last great UK parade was probably the Falklands War, I suppose, right? Anyways, is that a horrible segue? Let's go to Argentina. What is happening? Who is this guy, Javier Milei, who's gotten more attention about an Argentinian politician since Perón?
Argentina is another one of these South American countries that should be a lot richer, stronger, influential, and more powerful than it is. And I don't know, I've never visited. It's always been on my list of places to go to. As a sort of rampant non-vegetarian, you can imagine it's probably the best country for me to visit. I mean, you can basically have 300 different ways of steak, and that's kind of it. They may throw in a small green salad if you insist. But more seriously, the thing about Argentina is it's been completely fractured politically and financially since Juan Perón in the 1930s and 1940s. He decimated an economy that at the time of the First World War was the fifth largest economy in the world. I mean, we should be talking about Argentina in the same breath as India, and the same way also with Brazil. And there's something about Brazil and Argentina; they just don't seem to be able to get their act together. And we normally only get stories from Argentina that are about financial failure. Obviously, a certain amount of politics. They suffered, with military dictatorships and all the rest of it. I'm afraid they've had a usual sort of parade of rather corrupt politicians run things, but by Western standards, staggeringly corrupt. I mean, we're not talking about trivial stuff here. And as you say, this guy that we're now going to have to remember this guy's name, who I had never heard of until about whenever it was, 4 days ago, has burst on the scene. And what does this mean? I don't know, because I think I'm right in saying it's effectively a primary or an interim election. It's not the final result. But nevertheless, Javier Milei, I think is how we pronounce his name, has arrived from nowhere. As is as seems to be the way of the world these days, he's a bit of a colourful figure. I mean, there are endless sort of stories and tales about him. One of the most bizarre ones, if it's true, is he's got 5 dogs who've all been cloned from one mother. Make of that what you will. At a more serious level, um, is he another Bolsonaro? Is he going to get in? He's playing the look. We've all had enough of this. We're going to have to shake things up because things have just got so corrupt. His main, one of his main ideas, which I think may be incredibly dangerous, sounds plausible and straightforward, is the dollarization of the economy. Saying, look, the Argentine peso just goes down every year, then it stabilizes, and then it goes down again, and it's no longer a store of value. Hey, why don't we just adopt a dollar? I think that would have lots of unintended consequences, not least of which is a tremendous shortage of dollars in Argentina's reserves. So you would essentially completely trash the peso. Um, I don't know anybody who lives in Argentina, but I've read a couple of reports just ahead of this show that there's already a parallel economy now. So people are, if they get paid in dollars, they're trying to hang on to them, and they're trying to get rid of as many pesos as they can. And so you're already seeing, as ever, people vote with their wallet, and they vote as well as their feet. And how this all pans out, I don't know. I kind of suspect if he gets in, it'll just be another fantastic explosion of failure, because again, these guys, you know, the answer to a complex problem is not usually a simple answer, and he seems to be in the simple answer camp. But we may talk about him a lot in the future.
Well, I'm desperate to go to Argentina as well. I'm spot on. Maybe we can take the pod on the road. I've heard it's magical. I hear it's like an empire in waiting. You're spot on about the size of the economy. I mean, Argentina was actually a bigger economy than the United States in the early 1900s. It's ripe for expansion. In many ways, I think you're right. Brazil and Argentina to me seem like there's always that building on a corner that every 3 years has a new restaurant theme, right? And
Right.
it's a great location, but for whatever reason, they just can't make it work. And I think that is like, to me, Brazil and Argentina. It's like great everything on paper, but they can't find the right business model and the right concept, and the restaurant closes. This guy, some of these quotes are fantastic. He's a self-described anarcho-capitalist. He's
Wonderful.
opposed to the entire political establishment, wants to push through radical banking reform, shut down the central bank. His quote, we want to put an end to the parasitic and useless political caste in this country. And he has great hair like Boris Johnson. He's got all the hallmarks of what is good politics rarely makes good economics. But I don't know. Maybe Argentina needs to be shook up. What is so amazing is that I don't. Nobody to me was speaking about Argentina. This guy wins this primary. He's and it's like global news now. I mean, it's like also
But
a reminder that
we're getting a few of these, aren't we? In
we
Holland,
need,
we've
yeah,
had the Dutch Farmers Party appear from nowhere. And
exactly.
isn't this all part of a piece that the establishment and main political parties across most mature democracies, I don't know if we can call Argentina a mature democracy in truth, but people are fed up with it all, and they're kind of hunting around for something new. The risk is they find something that's far worse. But as you say, I think he's going to be, if nothing else, he's a colourful figure.
I mean, the economics are desperate. There's now a 2,000 peso note in Argentina. The inflation rate, I think, is nearly 100%, which is absolutely mind-boggling. You're spot on about the dollar, the economy, and people just seem to be so fed up with the political parties, the political processes, that maybe a revolution is needed. Thomas Jefferson had this famous saying, basically every 30, 40 years, every generation deserves to shake things up. And I don't know, maybe this is the time for it. But Argentina should be, to me, more prosperous, more successful.
Well,
But is this guy with the
always
bad
think
hair going to get it done?
I always think a good litmus test or benchmark for whether you think somebody's, a country or even a business or asset class is going to be successful is, would you put some of your pension fund in it? And
Right.
I wouldn't put any of my pension fund in an Argentine business. And so, who on earth is putting money into Argentine businesses? Well, I think you'll find most of it goes back to NGOs, World Bank, and all the rest of it, and other governments. Very little private capital is
What are
attracted
the
to these countries.
what are the other ideas? I don't know if you've seen this, Gerald. Milei's idea. He wants to allow you to sell your organs on the free market. He's that much of a capitalist that he is like, your body, your right. You
Well,
can
I must
sell.
say, I've got to an age where I think mine have got very declining value. To be honest, I've probably missed, I've probably missed my peak point. But it isn't this is the politics of desperation, and it's the politics of again saloon bar solutions. And I always kind of how to put it. I normally segue. Um, is it Huey Long from the 1930s into all these conversations that you get these very colourful, almost messianic type
Yeah.
figures, and they sort of rush they rush up on a puff of populism, and then they hit your favourite topic, which is reality, and in politics getting things done. And as you keep lecturing me and the viewers and listeners, politics is brilliant, but it only matters if you can actually get something done. And would this guy get anything done? I'm very doubtful, to be honest.
But he's definitely one to watch. I think the election is in October, so we'll be speaking about him for
Well,
a few more months.
he'll either be just a footnote, or he's 3 or 4 years of he'll be on every show. That assumes we're still going in 3 or 4 years' time.
What do you mean? Of course, where we go? Where else would we go? Where else would we go? All right. As we record this, it's 10:20 here on the East Coast at 11 a.m., which is what 1600 or yeah, right? What time is
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Well done.
1600 UK time. A very historic summit is happening, a trilateral summit between the United States, Japan, and South Korea. President Biden is welcoming the leaders of those great nations to Camp David, which is about 40 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. in
Yeah.
Maryland, beautiful part of the country. And they're going to have a summit, and they're coming together. They're basically saying, hey, let's more integrate our economies.
And
Let's more integrate the military. And this is historic for many reasons, obviously, because of the, the Japanese South Korean relationship is very tense and very fraught. But this is like a post World War II. I don't want to say it's a NATO type deal, but this is a really big summit. There we are back in the Indo-Pacific, back looking at Russia, China. What are your
yeah,
thoughts?
I agree with all of that. And as again, I'm sure you'll be quick to point out to me these things. A lot's already decided before they make the PR announcement that they're going to get together and sit on a sofa. I know there have been famous Camp David meetings that haven't quite worked or have gone off, half cocked, but you just get the feeling there's something going on. Maybe maybe a slightly different angle on this. Does this actually point bizarrely to weakness of the United States in the Pacific that they now need? I know.
Weakness, you say. Weakness, you say.
Yeah,
Oh my!
yeah,
Finally,
yeah,
violent disagreement. Weakness.
yeah.
Oh my
No,
God, I
but let
love
me
it.
finish. Let me finish.
Okay,
Look, we've
I'm
had.
so I'm so seeing red. The eagle talons are ready to pounce. I can only
Here we go.
see.
The second revolution is about to start. You'll be off to Bunker Hill soon. I think we've had a Pax Americana in the Pacific from 1945, and they, to be frank, they pretty much did it on their own. I mean, the Australians occasionally turn up with a few boats, and in the same way as the Royal Navy would once in a blue moon send one or two warships. But the simple fact of the matter is, the United States carried the entire burden. um, Two questions: can they still do that on their own, or do they actually start to need South Korea and Japan a lot more? And maybe let's not think about it in the old-fashioned sense of warships and aircraft carriers and this stuff, but things like microchips, cryptography, um, all this psyop stuff. Maybe Japan and South Korea, are pretty important in that, and that the United States needs them. I'm not denigrating the United States, but I'm just saying I just wonder if the shape of things is that's a shape in the future. Put it like that.
Now, I see what you're saying. I think what I often forget is that the U.S. is a Pacific power. I mean, not even obviously the Washington, Oregon, California coast, but obviously the
Mm.
Hawaiian Islands we talked about, and Alaska. I mean, the Aleutian Islands, which extend very deep into the Pacific Ocean. At one point, I just looked this up. If you measure Japanese territory, U.S. territory, is only 750 miles. I mean, that is like
Really,
really nothing. Yeah, which is
really,
pretty
wow.
wild.
And
Which
we
I hadn't really.
mentally think it's that whole Pacific of 3,500 miles or something,
Yeah,
which is the
exactly.
wrong
But if
way
the
to think about it.
Aleutians go so far west towards the Asian border,
Yeah,
but I see what you're saying. I mean, I think what's interesting is like historically, the United States is a very isolationist policy for various reasons, geography, mentality, etc. But coming out of World War II, there was no NATO equivalent. In fact, there were still skirmishes
cool.
fought. I mean, the you could say World War II lasted another 20, 30 years in the Indo-Pacific, Asia, etc., between Vietnam and Korea. But there was never this alignment. And I think in many ways that's caused this idea that we're an isolationist power, that we don't want to do everything. This is just the United States talking. But I think partnering up with Japan, bringing them more in the fold, bringing them more South Korea into the fold, I think is a positive step. Now, you could say it's a sign of weakness, but there's a lot of domestic pressure here in the States. Like, why are we doing this? Why do we care about this part of the world? But I think the smart people are like, no, we need more out. We need more friends. And I think
Yeah,
what's
no,
interesting is
I was I just thought I'd poke you with a dirty stick there slightly with my comment, but I think it's
no, but I think you're spot on because I don't think I think is DC, like it's interesting. The capital, like there's a lot of symmetry. Like it's looking back towards Europe. It's looking east, right? And for a long time, this is like inside the weeds, but most of the presidents, the swearing ins were on the east side facing Europe. And then
yeah,
when Reagan came in, he's like, I want to look west, bountiful, go west, young man. And I think we never really think of ourselves as a Pacific power. I mean, I think there's more diplomats in London and Paris than there are in Seoul and Tokyo, right? Because it's just
yeah,
psychologically, we don't think about that part of the world, but we
which
need
is
to.
kind of odd, which is kind of odd in a way. Talking of which, and this may stir up DC, and I know it's away from the Far East, but it's worth just a very quick footnote in this program. Looks like the Germans are rowing back on their 2% minimum budget um, agreement for defence. Um, I can just hear one of your favourite candidates, Mr. Trump, going to be using that within minutes, probably. But again, it just shows that I don't. I increasingly find Germany a difficult country to understand. I don't understand why they don't want to pay for their own defence, or more to the case, think that everybody else should pay for it, particularly when they're so wealthy. There's a disconnect there, but that's to one side. I agree with you that the anything to do with Southeast Asia now is incredibly important, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of little side agreements. Maybe it'll be just a line in the communique about Australia, because that all kind of fits of a piece now, I would have thought.
Yeah, it would seem like I would suspect you're spot on about Australia. It's interesting that they're not a part about this. Maybe that's the next evolution. Maybe like obviously there's so much bad history between South Korea and Japan that took, that had to be
Yeah,
a priority first.
that is incredibly difficult to get over, to be honest.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is the amount of news. We were just, in some ways belittling the amount of weather news, but I think like the amount of news we're getting about this, like the fact that Japan, South Korea, and the US are saying, hey, let's get more integrated. The fact that Germany is like trying to sort out their budget, the fact that what's going on with these, former French colonies in
Yeah,
Africa around Niger and, Mali. And, I mean, to me, this signifies like there's a lot going on. Like most of my life, it's been like these two big blocks. We had to worry about the big guys. The baddies were, pretty simple, but the world's gotten much more complex. There seems to be a lot more activity, which to
yeah,
me signifies that people are scared. Like they're really trying to find a way to kind of keep this thing together.
I totally agree. Once again, we're going to be in violent agreement today, but and a good example of that, and we mustn't go too off piste here, would be Turkey, where everybody wants Turkey to be their friend, from Putin right the way through to Biden. and everybody's terrified they're going to be on the other side. And at the moment, they're playing this rather good sort of both ends against the middle game. And whether that is a sign of stability or actually deep insecurity, Lord only knows. But you're right, there are loads of these sort of complex interactions going on around the world. And as you say, the nice days of guys in white hats or black hats, that's long gone, isn't it?
It's long gone, and it's also, we're dividing up the world almost between land and water, right? That is those countries that really use the ocean to advance their economies via trade, tourism, etc., versus those that are really honed in on land territory. Russia and China come to mind. I don't know. It's really quite interesting. I don't know if you saw this week too, when a senior Chinese official went to Belarus to talk about how much the Chinese Belarusian relationship is, and that is pretty wild.
He may have just upset President Xi and has been posted there.
But we're really seeing a break. Pivot. Okay, U.S., you're gonna Japan and South Korea are gonna be your buddies. Okay, we're gonna make Belarus a bigger ally. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting. What makes me a little agitated or anxious is just the amount that this is happening, right? That we're saying, hey, we need to find a way to work together. We don't really like the way the world is trending, so let's partner up now before it's too late. I think it's something to watch.
Yeah, agreed.
Speaking of something to watch, should we talk about the Trump clown show? I don't know if you have anything to add.
Promoted that up from a circus, or is that one down from a circus now? Have you
Well, I've called it a clown show since 15, so I guess maybe it's on Broadway now. I don't know. Is it a West End 10-week run show? I don't know. What's a higher level than a clown show?
I don't know, but let me give an ill-informed view from the outside. As a non-American, I'm now increasingly perplexed by different legal challenges and indictments and grand juries and all the rest of it in different states. And now people are saying that maybe Michigan's going to join in with a heap of indictments. Is that important, or is that the side story? Is there just one big legal case that's going to go forward, or how does it work?
Well, it is important because in our system, there's two things that I think should be important. States control elections, right? That is, every state decides how they're going to organize their ballot, what the polling hours are. It really is a patchwork.
Oh, so it's not nationally or federally organized in that sense.
Correct. I mean, there's an election day, but every state, since it's the United States of America, states have the authority to say, this is how we're going to conduct our elections, hours, this is how the ballot's going to look, etc. These are the requirements to get on the ballot. So that's pretty chaotic and crazy, but that's the way the system is. So I think that's super important for viewers that don't really know the intricacies of that. The other dichotomy, there's federal law and there's state law. Federal law, the president, if you're the president, you can pardon. That is, the president has the ability to say this federal law doesn't apply to you. So the thinking is, if Trump gets back into office, he theoretically could pardon himself from all federal wrongdoings. But state laws, the president of the United States cannot supersede. At least, I don't know, without maybe there's some crazy constitutional challenge and maybe goes to the Supreme Court and that gets overridden. So that's why the importance of these election laws at the state level. Trump essentially violated federal law. The federal government is saying that, and also state law. But himself pardoning himself makes it a very dynamic situation. That's why you'll see behind the scenes, there's a lot of talk to say, hey, let's make this a federal case. Let's move this up. Let's put this all into one circuit at the federal level, which should be more favorable in some ways to Trump. What's interesting about what's happening in Georgia, the RICO racketeering, 19 people involved. I mean, do you even have a courtroom that can fit 19 defendants plus attorneys plus, hang around? I mean, and just the logistics, any one of these people could say, I need more time for discovery. It's hard to think that this was done to go after Trump, but really, to me, what happens in election law, because freedom of speech, politics, I mean, if I say, hey, I need votes, does that really, are you threatening, or is that just political speech? I mean, it gets very complicated. But a lot of times, I think the U.S., the government in general, just wants to push bad actors out of the way and just say, listen, we've had enough of your nonsense. You're not playing by the rules, the spirit of the law, the way you're treating the election process. Let's move on. What's the problem with Trump is that he is absolutely shameless. He's fearless. He doesn't care. He's an absolute buccaneer. He is a pirate. He is just a pure clown in the sense he has no shame. So he doesn't care about this. Whereas any rational person who had this much heat on them would say, okay,
Yeah, they
I've
would
done
have
my
backed
time.
off.
I'm gonna move on. So that's the dynamic we're seeing.
And in terms of timetable, could this run right through an election campaign up to voting, or what's going to
I mean,
happen?
it's all over the map, and there's a lot of ways to delay the process. So for sure, I mean, there's so many cases that are going to happen simultaneously, but that, like I said, 19. If you bring a RICO racketeering charge against 19 people,
Yeah,
the idea that you're going to be able to control all 19 people and not have one attorney junk up the works, which is pretty easy to do. Um, justice doesn't always have to be swift. Justice can be delayed, and it's hard to see that it's
sure.
going to take years. To me, it's hard to see that it's going to be done by next year. I mean, to me, it's going to drag on.
So
So,
this kind of puts the Republican Party in a bit of a flat spin here, because there's this whole election campaign just are now, you know, over for them, in the sense that,
well, maybe it's not over, because what's interesting is that, theoretically, Trump is a citizen, like I'm a U.S. citizen. Any one of us can run. I can run. He can run. Anybody can run, as long as you meet the requirements, get on the ballot, etc.
yeah,
Really, at any given time, there's probably 100 people running for president, but usually the top two of the most, because they have the wherewithal, the skill. But if you go into a ballot, you know, um, especially get to the New Hampshire primary, I mean, I think you just got to spend like $50. You're on the ballot, right? So we have a very liberal small L sense, like, yeah, you want to run, you should run. Let the people decide. Don't let the government decide who should be
yeah,
president. So listen, if the American people, quote unquote, want to send Trump back to the White House, even if he's got all this legal drama, that's what the people have said. Let the people have spoken, kind of mentality.
right.
um, we've never seen this before. We've never seen a situation where somebody is just so shameless that they just won't step aside. I mean, I think if Trump said, I'm not running, I'm done, I'm going to, I don't know, go to Argentina, hang out, open a vineyard, the people, like, all this stuff would go away. So it's really what's happening is the political process has not expelled Trump, and the legal process is trying to do it. And that dichotomy, that friction, doesn't really work in our system. So that's why we've got the mess we have right now. And it looks sophomoric.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is going to run now, one way or another, as a topic throughout our shows. Just again for the non-Americans tuning in, things really kick off in January with the first primaries, or was it even earlier?
Well, even earlier, next week, there's a debate. There's a Republican debate in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's unclear if Trump's going to show up, but DeSantis, to crash, is slowing down. He needs a big night. We're really, next week is, I would say, this debate for political junkies is really going to kick it off. I think you're going to see a few candidates drop out in the fall because they're not going to have money. So then you get a smaller window. But the first vote, will be in January in Iowa. But no, next week with this presidential debate, if you're a political geek and you want to pay attention, it really kicks off, I think, next Thursday. And
So
we'll see what happens.
you're up to your neck in this now for what? About 14 or 15 months of watching and getting involved.
No, exactly. No, I think what's interesting is like what's happening in the UK as well. Like if the UK and the US both have elections in November 2024, I think you're going to see a lot of symmetry, because I think what the Biden team is trying to do, I'm certainly think that the Labor Party is going to follow as well. So I think both of us are going to be in the barrel for the next 12 months,
Well,
shouting about elections.
I've got a total indifference zone around me about the British election. For the first time in my life, I think I should be past caring, which I don't know. I seem very indifferent about everything. Ladies, football, British politics. This is a reflection on me. But you're right. It's going to be a big year next year, and there'll be winners and losers. It may be that the mantra of the last few months that the Labour Party are going to run away with it, When we get a little closer to the election, it may be a bit closer than that. But at the moment, all the money is on the Tories being out, and very hard to see anything else. But who knows? Well, anything can happen, over the next year or so.
Well, the indifference could be coming from there's so many big issues that just aren't being addressed properly. I think for me,
Sure.
that's like the challenge. Like we've just got I love that. Yeah, we've got these barroom salon style solutions to very complex, deep,
Yeah.
historical, multi-decade
And
issues
they're
that,
interlinked, and they're interlinked as well,
right,
which is
exactly.
why a lot of them are not easy to solve, and so people kind of grasp at the quick wrong answer.
Exactly. I mean, if you think selling your organs is a solution to peace and prosperity for your nation, that's some pretty wild stuff, man. I mean, if that's where we are, that is some pretty wild stuff. All right. Speaking of
Um,
pretty wild stuff, or do you have more?
no, I was going to say, yeah, there's nothing left to do then, is there? But so yeah, you're right.
Let's talk about VinFast, your new favorite automotive company, Vietnamese automaker producing electric cars and SUVs. Also got a connection to Singapore, which is interesting. Debuted on the stock market this week. It shot up 270% one day, dropped down to 20-30% the next day. But now it is worth, this company, VinFast is worth now more than Ford and General Motors. I mean, Gerald, what is going on
I
here?
am.
Are you all in on VinFast?
No, of course not. It'll be something else I'm indifferent to. I am immediately reminded of the Surgeon General, I think in the year 2000, who was under the wonderful name of Dr. Coop with a K. He launched a .com business, drcoop.com, and at one stage that was almost eligible to be in the S&P 500, although it was basically a series of PowerPoint slides. I mean, it is just astonishing nonsense. And it went through the roof, and where's drcoop.com now? Somebody's going to say, oh, it's still going and it's got 10,000 subscribers or something. But it's, and we've had stories like this before. We had it uh, numerous occasions. But what's interesting about all of this is not just, okay, it's EVs and they're hot and they're kind of sexy things to invest in, and oh, it's Vietnam and that's kind of new and interesting, and the Vietnamese, they've got a short but credible history of doing much better than even the Chinese and making things happen and all the rest of it. But the lesson to me is where all this credit has suddenly come from. We're not at zero interest rates, or the Fed's not still at 0.5%. We've now got a much more serious interest rate structure, and you would have thought a lot of these what may be okay companies, but also may just be flim flam, would have to be more sensibly valued. The valuation is completely mad. And of course, okay, 280 odd percent on the way up, but when we say 30% down, of course, that's a third of that has gone the very next day. But it's still an astonishing valuation. And now we get to the tricky bit. Many years ago, a guy told me at the .com stage, he said, look, when you launch a business, some people think it's a lunch, a logo, and a launch. All of that's brilliant, but you've actually got to produce something. And so obviously they've had some good lunches and logos, and now they had a very good launch. They are producing EVs, but they're hardly a name anybody's heard of in terms of production and all the rest of it. So as the more sensible stockbrokers in the world would say, I think it's an avoid. But I think the real lesson is that there's this wall of money that is so desperate to invest somewhere. And the fact that that wall of money still exists. And that may be why the Fed ain't going to cut rates very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, is this a polite money laundering situation? Where it just, I mean, why the psychologist? I'm always like the psychology of this, like why somebody would think this is a good idea, and say, yeah, here's my money, make this happen.
Well, I think, people get caught up in the excitement. A lot of money by investors is lost in areas they don't understand, and it's always around the latest fashionable thing, and it always overseas. So it must be exciting because this is exciting company in Vietnam. Well, it could have been, the wrong end of Burma, or somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa. The fact it's overseas seems to give it some sort of gloss. I'm not suggesting it's fraudulent or anything. I'm just suggesting it sounds staggeringly overvalued. And when you
Well,
look
I
at,
mean, they only sold 22,000 cars
yeah,
last year. I mean, it's like the
how
Jeep
many
plant.
cars?
The Jeep plant in Toledo, Ohio, makes
Yeah,
like 350,000 cars annually. I
I
mean,
mean,
it's
how
like,
many cars are sold every year in Washington D.C.?
oh
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, so the whole thing's mad. But again, it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. And we should remember that virtually all the electronic vehicle companies around the world, with the notable exception of the Chinese, are losing money and are cutting production. They've got caught up in a price war that they don't want to be involved in. So Tesla's been cutting auto prices again. But with the exception of the state backed and state funded with state credit Chinese companies, it's not actually a profitable business. Making EVs is not a profitable business.
Well, actually, yeah, and it depends on the price point. We were talking before we hit record. I mean, they're on the pensions and the healthcare.
Well,
Famously, GM is spending more on healthcare than they are on steel, and because of legacy and pension and
yeah,
whatnot. Also, I think it's important to remember, Vietnam is a communist country. I mean, there could be a state champion situation here. The
yeah, but
float
they're
was,
tiny. They're
yeah,
tiny.
and
I
the
mean,
owner still controls 99% of the company. So, I don't know.
and
That seems
again,
bizarre.
we must be careful what we say before we have transatlantic lawyers on us. But I guess he's probably got some interesting relatives.
Yeah. So now you could see
He'll
like
be well
Vietnam saying, "Hey,
connected.
we need a state champion here. We need a dramatic car company." But to say that this is worth more, I just looked this up. VW Group sold 8.3 million vehicles last
Yeah,
year. Ford 4.2. These guys, VinFast, 24,000 globally.
looks like they've got plenty of upside there.
There you go. Exactly. It's all about market share. Whenever when you go to these like entrepreneur contests and, somebody says, yeah, if I just get 1% of this market, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
You know how hard it is to get 1% of anything? It's pretty freaking hard. Anyways, VinFast coming to you. Maybe they'll be in Formula One Monaco soon.
Maybe it'll be Vin Slow.
Oh, look at you, wordsmith. Vin Slow. Vin Crash. I love it. All right. What are we reading and watching, Gerald? Do you want to go
Right
first?
now, I recently had a birthday, which I'm just recovering from, and
What are
I've
you,
got to
Keith
the age
Richards?
now. I've got to that age where you realise you're getting old when you say to friends and relatives, "Oh, it's only just a number," and that you never say that when you're 14, but you do when you kind of got to my age. Anyhow, a birthday gift I got from my sister and my brother-in-law, who I think may be esteemed listeners or viewers of this, is a book by the British historian Michael Wood, and it's
Wait.
called.
Let's back that up. You think they haven't personally told you they've watched, like they're
I've got
passively or
their firm assurance. I've got their
so
firm.
they're well. Why don't you say confident viewers?
I never
Are you
like
just being you're
to.
just
I
being
never like.
polite?
I don't like to impose on relatives.
And I guess would they be embarrassed if they were down at the local pub to say they listen to this pod? Is that the situation?
I couldn't possibly comment.
Are
But
you protecting their their social standing?
I don't know. But I'm
Okay.
moving on. Here's the book. It's called The Story of China. It's by quite a well-known British historian, Michael Wood. He pops up a lot in the BBC, and I think he's on PBS a lot. He made his name more on Western history than necessarily on China. He's a pretty famous name. He's also blessed with good looks, so he's one of these people who sort of permanently looks 35. And if you look him up, I think he's probably north of 70. Anyhow, this book, as a present, duly arrived, and let me have a quick look at a number of pages. We're just banging over almost exactly 600 pages. So again, Mark, I'm inflicting another great sort of encyclopedic work on everybody. That and I'm always slightly fearful of these books because I found this with Russian history. You get lost in all the names
Yeah,
and you've got to try and remember all the different dynasties. And I think, oh no. Um, this is the opposite. This is, as much as you're going to get a page turner, it's an extraordinarily easy and straightforward read. The way they've done the anglicization of all the Chinese terms and place names and family names and everything is very straightforward. And it runs really from the earliest days of the foundation of China, which really comes with the first Emperor Qin, pretty much up to date. I did dip in at the end to see quite where we finish. I think we just about get the presidency. There's a lot on, obviously, Mao and Chiang Kai shek, and there's a lot on Cultural Revolution and Deng Xiaoping. So the last 20% of the book is, I wouldn't say it's current affairs, but it's much more near history. And one bit of Chinese history which I was totally unaware of, and is features a lot in this book, and actually featured a lot in the book we talked about a couple of times ago, Peter Turchin's End Times, is there was the most titanic Chinese civil war in the 1840s and 1850s, the so-called Taiping Rebellion. And we are talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people were killed. And I sailed through every history class known, and no mention of it at all. In fact, I'd
yeah.
never heard of any of this until about 6 weeks ago. That's a bad reflection on me, but it's also a reflection on the fact that, still our historic landscape and roadmap is still very westernized. And so it's quite good to kind of shift it by looking, at this book. So, as I say, it's called The Story of China, Michael Wood. Okay, it's 600 pages, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. And, you might cheat and say you're only interested in the 20th century. So you start with the last emperor, who was a little lad of 6 or 7, who was controlled by his, I think, either his mother or his stepmother, and the collapse of the Chinese empire as was. But it's a really, really good read today.
I love it. I will look forward to that. I've read, several books. You're spot on about the history of civilization. When I was doing U.S.-China stuff almost daily, dealing with the Chinese diplomats, they would remind you in the same sentence that they're a young country because the communists, have only been in charge for several decades, but they're an old civilization, that they're 5,000 years old. But I
Yeah,
do think that rupture, the 1840s, is key. I mean, that century of humiliation, like they really have used that as a
yeah,
lightning rod in
absolutely.
Beijing to say this,
And it feeds into modern politics because Wood
100%,
Wood makes a point over the last 1,300 years or whatever is the range he's talking about, is the absolute central and center number one factor is control. The
100%.
Chinese governments have only succeeded when they've managed to keep control of the country, and very close control. And the idea that you're going to have a sort of knockabout democracy that you've got in the United States, or we even have in Western Europe, is for the birds. The whole Chinese establishment, the whole of Chinese history, is about somehow keeping it all together. And when they fail to do so, they either tear one another apart or they get invaded, primarily either by the Mongols or the Japanese, all the rest of it. So it plays, final quick point, it plays to your point, there's a presidency's number one thing on his list every day, as your great phrase, how do we keep this party going? And I think you're bang on with that, bang on.
No, spot on. You're so right to read that book, Culture Code. I mean, it's just tattooed on the Chinese mentality, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So viewing, let's and you have to be a vintage older than me. So here we go. Maybe people, maybe one or two listeners here or viewers can recall the year. Let me get it right. 1943. So what's special about 1943? Well, believe it or not, Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, Joe Pesci, and the great director Martin Scorsese were all born in 1943. And I think it was yesterday was De Niro's 80th birthday. Um, I kind of late to the De Niro party, really, in some ways. I've only really watched his films with great interest in the last 10 or 15 years. He's kind of one of these guys who rarely disappoints, whether he's got a very good agent or whether he's been lucky. But you're pretty unlucky to watch a De Niro film that's not worth watching. But he is 80. So I thought, well, what's one that I always enjoy? So for my viewing I've suggested Ronin. This is a Japanese term to do with samurai. It's nothing about that. It's about it's kind of a heist movie set in the south of France involving the IRA and some mysterious, presumed to be Russian group. And it's directed by the late great John Frankenheimer, who did some great sort of chase stuff in the past. Did a famous film called The Train with Burt Lancaster. He also did a very great Formula One film in the 60s called Grand Prix. Anyhow, Frankenheimer has gone to town on car chases and all the rest of it, but in an intelligent way. This isn't, Car Chase 14 or whatever these films are called. So it's a good plot. De Niro is excellent in it, I think, and crikey, it must be 25 years old. But it, as a way of, looking at maybe not the obvious first De Niro film to go to, it's a good one to watch. It's called Ronin, Ronin.
Love it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of De Niro. One of my favorite movies is Heat by Michael Mann, and yeah, I'm gonna check out. I haven't seen Ronin in a while. I think I'm gonna check that out tonight. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially south of France. We're getting car chases south of France. What's
Well,
better than that?
as this show's leading Francophile, I obviously went for that straight away.
Yeah, you're Francophile. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very subtle, but it's there. Anyways, I'm reading Unfinished Presidency. Sorry about the glare. This is about President Carter, who's still with us. He's 96 years old. He left office when he was 56, and he's had a 4-decade run. And in some ways, he's been the most prolific post-president America's ever seen. I mean, he's done more post-presidency than he probably did. In 4 years, you can't really get anything done. But really interesting book, going back. Probably the first real president I remember myself. So just taking me back to the, early, late 70s, early 80s, and, some of the stuff we're still talking about today. So Douglas Brinkley, one of our foremost American historians, but I found it to be a really good book. It's about 100 pages in, but speaking of Camp David that we're seeing today with the U.S., South Korea, and Japan, obviously the Camp David meetings Carter was very famous for, and Carter had a very philosophical approach and almost like a gracious approach to the presidency, which probably didn't really serve him well. Go ahead.
I was just going to say his reputation has grown since the presidency, because at the time he was hardly seen to be a success, really, was he?
Well, he came, he was a governor of Georgia, kind of lack of a better word. I mean, Georgia at that time was nowhere near the powerhouse, country, city, state it is now. Atlanta is a powerhouse, global country, hosted the Summer Games, but he was a Georgia peanut farmer, lived a pretty simple life, very religious, did go to the Naval Academy, which is
I was going to say, there's a little bit more to him in that. Wasn't he a submariner, actually? Wasn't he involved?
Yeah, submariner, which, typically people coming out of the Naval Academy that get the job in the submarine corps are the most talented, smartest, because that's a nuclear power. It's all kinds of, that's obviously going underwater for weeks at a time. It takes a special person to do that. And he wins this election, gets in there, but really never connected with kind of like the city Democrat politics, like the big cities of like Boston and Chicago, and that dichotomy is interesting. But yeah, it's been a fun book, and many of the issues that we're still dealing with today, China, the economy, how to keep this thing going, is still being talked about. So I'm glad I picked it up. Speaking of massive books, last weekend I went to the National Book Festival here in DC, which is sponsored by the Library of Congress. I've never been. Absolutely a book geek, just fandom. I mean, like total, like people just totally into books, totally into libraries. Unbelievable, huge crowd. One of the lectures I went to was a woman, I forget her name, Russell, I think. She just completed a book, 900 pages, on J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover ran the Federal Bureau of Investigation,
Sure.
FBI, for over 4 decades. She spent 12 years, Gerald, 12 years working on this book, 900 pages. Oh my gosh. Her next book is going to be on Reagan. So
Good
I've not
Lord.
committed myself to a few things over a decade, but to write a book is pretty special. Um, I'm going to finish up with something light. Johnny Football. This is Johnny Manziel. There's a documentary on Netflix. Johnny Manziel played at Texas A&M. Very colorful kid. First freshman to ever win the Heisman. The Heisman going out to the most prolific college football player. He wins the Heisman as a freshman. Meteoric rise, takes off, leaves college, goes to the Browns in Cleveland. Totally flames out. This kid was like bigger than the Beatles, bigger than the Rolling Stones, bigger than VinFast, but crashed 2 years later. And I don't know, just such a cultural explosion. Everybody knew this kid, from this backwater Texas A&M, far western school. Just takes over the country. Colorful personality, a lot of demons off the field, crashes, implodes. And I don't know. It's
It
just
sounds
one of
like
these stories you want to watch.
it sounds like one of these modern day Greek tragedies that
Well, he just didn't. Yeah, he didn't. He was so talented that he just didn't care, and he obviously let off-field antics get in the way. And to play as a professional football player, you got to be a pro. You can't
yeah,
mess
yeah,
around, even if you are a rock star. So,
yeah, yeah.
interesting story. All right, that's all we got for this week of Ructions. I think it was a pretty good
Well,
show.
we didn't quite do A to Z or Z as you would say, but we did A to V, didn't we? Argentina to Vietnam, so that's not bad.
My gosh, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's exciting. We brought in new people.
And,
Argentina,
and and new
Vietnam. I love it.
things and new things to worry about. Lovely.
Who knows what'll happen in the next 2 weeks? But we'll see you. We'll be back. I guess it'll be September when we'll get together. Wow,
Indeed. Yeah.
the fall is happening. All right, buddy. See you soon, Gerald. Thanks, man.
Take care, Mark. Bye bye.